Technology means that there's so much more information available to us. Yeah, we've had the rise of the finfluencers.
Doesn't finfluencers talking about those things and advice happening through TikTok, Instagram, going live, a lot of push ads on YouTube. So how do you see that disparity between finfluencers or providing advice to the majority of the market probably?
I think most of the people who are sharing this message on platforms like TikTok, Instagram or others, they're not just some benevolent, experienced person who's coming there to share their knowledge with those people who are close to them and are benevolent mentors. They're going on there with an agenda. Okay, so investing in property, I'm personally a real estate investor. I see the benefits of.
And how has the economic growth being stunted at many levels?
It's like any startup. You're going to get these rapid periods of growth and these kind of golden eras, and then you go from exponential growth, things start to become incremental growth.
How are the regs catching up to what's happening in the crypto space?
Building our clients' wealth slowly and managing downside rather than searching for speculative wins.
And what do you see in terms of the younger people? How is their view on financial literacy?
And I think a lot of young people, I think a lot of older people are probably influenced by these beautifully presented lives that they're scrolling through and seeing on their phones every day, and aspire to something that may or may not be founded in reality. A lot of focus on speculation, on quick wins. I get a lot of inquiries come through into our business internet with people asking for passive income.
Welcome, Raymond. How are you?
I'm very good, Dev. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. Good to be sitting with you today and having this conversation. I need to get my head around so many things around all financial services and banking. But before we go into that I want your a bit of a background and experience and what you have done and your journey on your business.
Sure. Okay. Look, I could probably take up an entire hour talking about just that. So I'll probably just get to the highlights reel on that one. So I'm the managing director of Empire Financial Group. We're a East Perth-based financial services, financial planning, wealth management business. I've been running this business now for 19 years. So it's actually quite scary to think about how long that has been occurring. So yeah, my background has been in financial services from when I was still studying at university. I was working in my father's accounting practice over the university holidays, and there'd be I'd be sitting there coding bank statements and all the boring stuff that technology now takes care of. There's technology that's taken away all of that stuff that very young accountants or people studying would come in and do.
Were you forced to use
work.
the calculation by yourself, or
we'd sit there with a ruler and go through bank statements and compare them with check butts, I realised that path wasn't for me. There used to be a gentleman who would come along, and he was the financial services guy. He would come and talk to people about insurance and superannuation, and to me he was very impressive because he'd turn up in his nice suits and he'd have his 3 Series BMW, and he seemed to just come in and talk to people and have a grand old time. And I thought that sounds a lot more interesting to
not back of desk, but
to
front
what
of
I was
desk.
doing. So one day I asked him, well, how do I get to do what you're doing? And he said, well, yeah, why don't you come along? So that's where the journey started. Things change, things evolve. I went down that path to eventually end up falling into corporate superannuation back when that was a thing before the big massive industry funds and so forth really started to dominate that space. But yeah, so I was in the corporate superannuation space. Probably I like to say maybe that I hit my peak a little bit too early. During that time, I was involved in setting up and rolling out the LJ Hooker superannuation fund. And at the time that was 500 offices, 5,000 staff all around the country. So I spent a few years crisscrossing all across Australia. I was I was a FIFO worker before FIFO really became a thing here. I'd fly in and out between Perth and all corners of the country. And then we had a large publicly listed company come along and show interest in that. And so, we sold that business to them. So I found myself in a situation where I thought, okay, well, what do I do next? After I'd done my obligatory time with the purchaser of that business, I got into retail advice, one-on-one, and got Empire Financial Group going from scratch. So just me, an empty filing cabinet, a very open appointment book, lots of time, and lots of energy, and just got to it.
And how big is the team now, and what's the size of the operation?
Yeah, we've got 23 people in the operation now. We're continually growing, and we're on a growth trajectory. So I'd anticipate that even by the year's end, we should see those numbers growing with some of the things that we've got in the pipeline. I think that within the next 12 months, we'd hopefully start to see that nudging 30 people.
Oh, that's good. That's a growing and fledgling and thriving business.
Yeah, it's certainly growing. Growing, thriving. I don't like to jinx these things, so I'm quite cautious
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, cautiously optimistic. I think there's a lot of people who talk a big game, but don't have a lot of substance to support the talk of the big game. I don't know. I'd just rather, as you say, be cautiously optimistic, be conservative. I'm conservative in every aspect of my life, I'd say. Very careful, very cautious in the way that we handle our clients' money and the approach that we take to how we handle our client relationships, to the growth trajectory in the business. I think there's some really strong foundations of the business. The business has grown slowly, but it's grown slowly on purpose. I haven't got too carried away with the next shiny idea and gone too far down a path and not had the right foundations there. So, cautiously optimistic of this trajectory continuing.
Lovely. You have observed the financial services space for a couple of decades now. I would like you to paint a picture in terms of how has the sector evolved, the evolution of the sector, the mindset of the governments, federal and the state, not too much state, and the regulation, the banking, financial services, the providers like you, and the consumers or the customers. So how has the behaviors changed at all these three different parts of the trio?
Yeah, goodness. Another huge question, and lots of different questions and sub-questions within there. No doubt a lot has changed. And it hasn't been slow and gradual change. If I think about the last 20 years and how I've seen things unfold, I think there was always change. There's always disruption. I think in any business, in any industry, in any profession, there's going to be change. Some industries, some professions have significant, very rapid disruption. Whether it's technology, in particular, lately has disrupted a lot of industries. I don't think we've seen that sort of disruption come through in financial services yet, although it's no doubt coming. Our biggest disruption has come from government regulation and change in government regulation. And I think that's always been bubbling away, that governments have wanted to change certain aspects of the financial services space. But certainly over the last 7 or 8 years, in particular since the Royal Commission into banking and financial services, there's been significant disruption, both in terms of regulation, both in terms of the shift in who's been providing financial services in Australia, with the massive retreat of the major banks from the provision of advice, the consolidation then of that next tier of wealth managers, be that institutional financial advice providers or fund managers that have been outside of that banking space, but that next tier down, there's been a lot of consolidation in that space. And now we're seeing the rise of the scaling up of what were retail financial advice businesses, where that has been disrupted. There's still a lot of the small operators who are holding on, who are still making a living doing what they do because they love it and they're passionate and they love their clients. But are finding it increasingly difficult to deliver their services in a changing regulatory space, in an increasing cost of delivery environment, and are realising that scale is becoming important. I read an article just a couple of days ago based on education requirements. So this has been another disruptor, but again, that comes from the government space in terms of education requirements to continue to provide advice. That there's an expectation from this one publication that some 1,000 advisors over the next 12 months are probably going to hand in their licenses because they're not going to meet the requirements. And these are primarily older advisors, experienced advisors, not unqualified advisors. A lot of these people are very highly qualified
and experienced,
but just don't have the exact specific qualification that the government is asking them to have at this particular moment in time. So these are people who might be very experienced, people with qualifications in a financial related space. They might be trained accountants, CPAs, CAs, economists, people with finance degrees, and I've seen plenty of people with master's degrees in accounting, economics, applied finance. So we're not talking about unqualified operators here, but they're just not meeting this evolved criteria. And given their time frame to retirement, it probably doesn't justify the investment in getting those qualifications for the time frame that they have. So they're exiting the advice space. So it means that we've got a growing pool of retirees, a growing pool of people with more complex financial requirements, a changing and a rapidly changing financial services regulatory environment for consumers, not only for the people providing the advice. The most recent profile or high profile change that is getting a lot of airtime now is this Division 296 tax, which is a very controversial tax that the government is wanting to push through Parliament on taxing unrealised capital gains within superannuation funds. It's unheard of. It's going to create so much uncertainty and so much extra administrative burden that people are now getting their heads around. So you've got this increasing requirement for people to understand how the structures that are available to them work, requiring advice on how to reframe their own financial world in light of these changes, but less advisors available to offer that advice. So this disruption is far-reaching.
I think, give us a context on the change of consumer behavior pre and post Royal Commission. Your disclaimers have gone longer before you, and has the consumer behavior changed of what has happened in the past to see that I need to be more vigilant and understanding of things? I need to read all the T&Cs, what I'm covered and not covered. Is there an add-on, change? Have you changed the evolution on the consumer behavior, or is it?
Look, I think there's been an evolution certainly in consumer behaviour, but I think that's the case in across everything. Technology means that there's so much more information available to us, for better and for worse. We've had the rise of the finfluencers.
Cryptocurrency.
Yes.
We'll go there, but yes.
Yeah, so we've had the rise of the finfluencers and a whole range of other false prophets out there who are using technology, who are using formats and like the one that we're participating in today, to propagate a line of thinking that I don't know if it's grounded in reality sometimes, but it is influencing consumer behaviour. So there's a lot of people who are getting information from other sources. So there's an increasing rise of the DIY approach. In the same way that we've got Dr. Google, we've got now a rise in people who are getting their financial literacy and education from Google, and increasingly now from ChatGPT.
You're right.
And in the same way that doctors are appalled by some of the decisions that people are making based on what Google or ChatGPT is telling them about their health, there's lots of things, because I know that I have plugged certain things into ChatGPT. So rather than going and referring to our old school paper-based Ready Reckoners or going into our other resources, sometimes for ease, I've punched something into ChatGPT and asked them, can you give me an update on these thresholds or on these rates? And I'm thinking it'll be a quick, easy way to get that information. I've got that information back out. I know it's incorrect.
Yes.
Now, I know enough to challenge it and say to ChatGPT, are you sure I think this is incorrect?
ChatGPT fills the gap sometimes.
Yes, but without a good understanding and knowledge of being able to discern what's right and wrong, you can go down the wrong path. So consumer behaviour has changed. The other thing the consumer behaviour, there's been push and pull factors on that change in consumer behaviour. Yes, people are much more informed, or have much more information available. It doesn't mean they're better informed.
Yeah.
They've got more information available to them. But the increasing cost of the delivery of financial advice post Royal Commission has meant that the availability of simple advice to the ordinary, everyday mum and dad, middle Australia is becoming prohibitive. My view may be controversial. My views sometimes often are.
Are you paid for opinions?
But I think that the banks had a place in the provision of advice in Australia. There was a role for the banks to provide, and the reason why. They were providing subsidised advice based on the fact that they did have a vertically integrated model. They provided subsidised advice on some transactional advice that otherwise would have probably cost a lot more to deliver, but they could provide it at a subsidised price because the flow of funds or premiums into insurance policies or superannuation funds, whatever it was going to in-house product solutions. What we found during the Royal Commission was that was being abused, and how it was then delivered certainly raised a lot of eyebrows and a lot more than that. So those poor behaviours needed to be addressed. But I think that we might have maybe thrown the baby out with the bathwater. In that it's meant that we've excluded a lot of people from that sort of advice that they would have been happy to receive at a subsidised rate, knowing that, okay, look, I've walked into, and I don't want to pick on any one bank, but if I've walked into that bank's front door and I see their sign on the top and that I'm going to end up with my money sitting in a solution that is owned by them, well, is that such a bad outcome as long as it's a reasonably good solution for me, and I've got it at a price point that suits my requirements. So we've seen this shift in that area that demographic can't access advice anymore, and we've now got a increasingly complex environment. We've got an increasingly complex environment, costs to deliver from professional indemnity insurance, various levies. If I have a look at just the ASIC and this new compensation scheme of last resort levy, just the cost of levies in our business, you look at it and it turns your stomach to think about these costs that are now being incurred. But it's meant that our cost to serve has increased, which means that we can only service a type of client that is in a position to be able to pay for that type of advice. For us, in good conscience, to charge somebody that, we know that, well, in addition to that fee that they're paying us, we need to be delivering value well in excess of that, which means that there's only a certain type of client that we can work with that can deliver that type of value to. What it also means is that we have to have a particular type of advisor who's skilled enough to be able to deliver that sort of value. So as much as there's a lot of there's been a lot of uproar around what this change in regulation has meant for advisors, and a lot of them have had to exit the advice space, I'm grateful for it to a certain degree. It certainly made my business a better business than what it otherwise might have been. It's forced us to be better. It's forced us to lift our game. It's forced us to say, okay, well, if it's not affordable for us to deliver advice to this type of client anymore, and this is who we need to be targeting our services to, but that type of client is far more informed, is far more discerning, has a greater threshold for the delivery of value. Well, we need to evolve our business, change our business. We need to lift as a business, as the individuals within the business, to be able to deliver that to that type of client. It's made us all better.
On the side of, we talked about consolidation is happening across, and the old school problem of consumer choice and control. When you consolidate, the choices is not too many. And whereas when you have a smaller provider providing more hyper customized services in that area or in that geographical area, as well as plus the verticals in terms of the skill sets, how has that choice and control shrunk or expanded?
There's been the rise of self-licensed advice practices, where previously an advice practice, a smaller advice practice, would join what we in our language call a dealer group, which basically means a centralised licensing service that meant that they could provide all of the compliance, all the governance, access, professional indemnity insurance, software, all these other services at scale, and then advice practices would buy into those services. But in order to protect their license, they would have to have lots of control over how advice was delivered, the compliance framework. So as much as we thought that we had a very fragmented advice space with lots of smaller practices, they were still not so much controlled. Controlled, I think, is a strong word, but they were still providing advice within quite strict boundaries.
Yeah.
The exit of banks out of that space, who were providing a lot of those dealer group services, but other dealer groups where it's been more difficult for dealer groups to remain profitable, has meant that advice practices have gone to get their own licenses, and so to a larger degree now, even though we've got maybe less practices and they've consolidated together, I think there's probably a lot more individuality in the way that they're going about running their businesses. So there's always going to be a space for the boutiques. There's always going to be a space for highly specialised smaller practices providing very specific types of specialised advice to particular clients. I don't think that's ever going to go. It's probably going to have to be delivered at a price point that justifies them remaining so boutique. I think you're going to then get that rise of that mid-tier. Like, it's probably no different to accounting practices, in that you've got your large, your very, very large practices that are providing advice to that very top end and corporate end of the market. But you're going to get that middle of the bell curve, mid-tier practices, and then you're probably going to get those good CBD fringe commercial centre accounting practices that are probably going to be reflective of the way that you'll see financial services businesses go as well.
Touched on finfluencers. There are quite a few people, talking about those things, and advice happening through TikTok, Instagram, going live. A lot of pushed ads on YouTube, it's rocking up in a feed. But these people are not in the jurisdiction. So how do you see that? How do you, from a regulatory point of view, how do you see one that could be managed or can't be managed at all, or accept that? How is that? One is probably they have their own personal experience, what they have done. They're probably giving out their personal experience plus, now being an expert. For the majority of the market, which might not exist during shrinkage of advisors who are capable and then right enough to give it advice. So how do you see that disparity between influencers or providing advice to the majority of the market, probably in many ways?
Look, I think there's always going to be people out there with a lot of experience and some great personal knowledge that they can share with people around them, whether they're qualified, licensed, or otherwise. These are people who have done well, whether that's in the financial services space. There could be some people who are very experienced business people and have a really strong understanding of business structures and how money flows between them and the tax outcomes on those, but they're not necessarily accountants either. But they've probably got some knowledge that they can share with others. And I think I don't want to discount successful, experienced people sharing knowledge. Whether those platforms are the best places for it, I'm not sure. But I think most of the people who are sharing this message on platforms like TikTok and Instagram or others, they're not just some, benevolent, experienced person who's coming there to share their knowledge with those people who are close to them and are benevolent mentors. They're going on there with an agenda. They're going there to commercialise their message. And as soon as they've got that shift now from, okay, I'm an experienced person with something to share, to I'm commercialising this, now we've got to chase, okay, well, where's the self-interest leading to? Okay,
a training course.
Well,
a training course or a trading platform.
Correct. So that's the scary bit. ASIC, so the regulator, and again, just recently there's been press around ASIC taking action against certain influencers. But there's so many of them, and the platforms are just, there's so much. The barriers to entry are so low. How do you control them? They're popping up like weeds. Anybody with a smartphone and an internet connection can tomorrow pop up. How does the regulator control these people? I think there's probably got to be some really, really harsh penalties set down that if you can't control all of them and regulate them and prosecute all of them to a small degree, you've probably got to really publicly come down hard on some of the worst offenders, that there's a deterrent. But I think then the second part comes just down to a counter education platform that people get a really strong understanding of how real is this really? I mean, this person is coming up, as I said, push ads. This person is coming up in your feeds, standing in front of their suite of sports cars, standing in front of a mansion. I mean, how real is it? I mean, if they're
so there are people. I've also observed property investments. There are people who are regularly flying in from Middle East, Dubai, running those property seminars. And then going around the country, but they are local property agents or sales agents.
No, they're not agents. They're not.
I don't know who they are.
Yes, so you're touching a raw nerve here. So you finish the question, and I'm going to get onto that one.
So you have to clarify that. That's what I'm trying to. So people who are coming from other country, selling a property investment, coming in, running seminars, giving advice, and people who are buying into it, the money is going out of this jurisdiction to some other jurisdiction, and then how is that seen, and how is that probably no can't control that, but how do you see that kind of from a consumer point of view?
Where I'm starting to see some of these foreign investment opportunities, schemes pop up. I haven't seen too many consumers necessarily affected by them yet. The ones that, when I said it touches a raw nerve, are the local house and land package floggers. Now, some might think that my perspective is maybe is clouded or nuanced by the fact, well, you're a financial advisor, you want people to invest in the areas that you invest in, that you manage and that you control. And I think that maybe historically, maybe for some practices, or some people who have a strong philosophical belief in one type of investment over another, that might be the case. In our business in Empire Financial Group, well, let's say we're asset class neutral. We have never discouraged anybody from buying real estate as long as they've got the right timeframes, the right equity position, the right income position, and then most importantly, that they're buying the right type of asset out the other end. So the way that we run our business and our philosophy is that we don't link our fees to funds under management, where so someone comes in and says, look, I want to invest over here, or I want to invest over there. All right, well, look, we'll model out the scenarios. We'll model out option A, option B, option C. Let's now see which one of those models is going to be is going to give us the best outcome, at least with the assumptions that we're making, and we can drive our decisions based on that scientific approach as opposed to just gut feeling, or hey, look, this is what I've got to sell, so I'm going to now try to convince you to buy what I've got to sell. So we will support property investment in the right circumstances with the right end purchase. Very, very, very rarely would I think that buying an investment property from one of these seminars, from one of these people who says, well, you should be investing in property, but as long as it's one of the ones that I'm selling you.
Yeah.
Okay, so investing in property, look, a lot of our clients, so many people have made so much of and created so much of their wealth off the back of real estate. I'm personally a strong advocate for my own, and I'm not saying this is not advice, I'm not saying others should follow this path. So all the disclaimers are relevant, and I'm putting them out there. But I'm personally a real estate investor. I see the benefits of long-term compounding of leveraged investments. It suits my personal risk profile. It might not suit others. So I'm not discouraging people buying real estate, but why does it have to be the one that they're selling you in these supposedly growth suburbs that all seem to be out on the very outskirts of the cities, in greenfield sites, with more land available? As far as you can see, there's all the other land releases still going to come through over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. All of these things. So the only way you can make money off real estate is when demand for a particular type of product exceeds the supply. So where do we have limited supply? We have limited supply in established suburbs that have already been built up, where there is demand to get into these pockets of the city, but no more space is available to build any more of it. Limited supply, high demand. If you're coming into a greenfield site where you have unlimited supply, and where these properties are being sold to people in a seminar environment where we get people in here, and then we create this high pressure environment where now we've got people running forward, and now everyone then follows and they start signing up for these things. And if I've run a seminar and I've sold 20 properties that night, well, then I build 20 properties. If the next seminar I've sold 15, I build 15. Supply meets demand. And now you've got these little pockets of town which are all sold to investors. When things get tight, when things get tough, the last thing that people sell is their family home. But the first thing they'll offload are their investment properties. All right? So if you've now got an investment property in a particular pocket where everyone's an investor, and now you've got all these popping up, and yours is exactly the same as the one that was built down the road and the street over, because they're all the same floor plan, just with a different colour scheme. All it takes is for one person to get desperate, sell at a low price, and that sets the price for everyone else.
Yeah.
I just think that fundamentally that environment isn't the one that I think supports the best long-term capital growth opportunities. Now, the people who are giving this supposed advice, so the term financial advisor, financial planner, these things are enshrined in legislation. Unless you are licensed, you cannot call yourself these things. So now we've seen the rise of these quasi terminologies, wealth educator, they're educators, they're consultants, they're all these things other than advisor or planner, because they can't use those terms. People, the consumer, can't discern between those. The issue with some of this real estate stuff is that these guys, if they're selling a new off-the-plan property investment, they're not real estate sales agents. So they're not licensed real estate agents. They're not licensed advisors. They fall within this little black hole, Bermuda Triangle of regulation and licensing, where they're completely unregulated, where they're completely unlicensed.
But the problem gets amplified. When it's a foreign investment.
Well, that's then another story again. So right now, I mean, you're
throwing your money in a foreign jurisdiction.
And then if there is any recourse, trying to get recourse against somebody who's flown and then flown back out, I mean, that for me is then, I mean, that's a whole other level of risk and complexity that I would advise extreme caution. Again, I can't say anything in absolute terms without assessing the specific opportunity, the specific individual circumstances. There might be some circumstances where it isn't, but I would be, so with all disclaimers applying, I would be applying extreme caution in foreign jurisdictions. But don't just think because you're buying off the guy that's run the seminar down the road that you're going to be any better off. Right? Again, this is an unregulated environment that the government still hasn't managed to clamp down on. And we're not just talking about federal financial services, we're also talking about state regulations and consumer protection and state licensing, which again still hasn't managed to get a grip on that particular sector.
I wanted to shed some light on broader economic and fiscal policy from a federal point of view, and in the last decade or two, that what has happened, and how has the economic growth being stunted at many levels, hasn't been the lucky country, haven't used all the assets and in real terms to create that economic push and growth or wealth creation for the nation.
You say that we haven't created that?
We haven't. I think, stunted in many ways and forms.
Yeah, look, I think we could probably compare different times and different golden eras. I mean, Australia is a very young country in its present form. So, our colonial era evolution is, and the economic data that we can then measure since British arrival and settlement is relatively young. And I think, like any, it's like any startup. You're going to get these rapid periods of growth and these kind of golden eras, and then you go from exponential growth, things start to become incremental growth. I'd still say that on a relative scale, I still think our standard of living is pretty good. I'd still say that we're still very much a lucky country. I think that particularly in Western Australia, there's been lots of opportunity. People have had the opportunity to earn incomes, and I'm not saying this as a. I know that there's always going to be people in the community who aren't going to, for whatever reason, be able to access the opportunities that are available to others. There's a whole range of reasons why people find themselves excluded from some of the opportunities and prosperity that comes with it. But I don't know. I look at some of the clients that we see coming through the door and some of the incomes that they're earning from parts of the workforce that have probably historically not expected to be earning that sort of money. If I think about as a teenager and going through high school, we were told, study hard, go to university, get a job where you go to work in a suit and a tie, and that's going to lead to prosperity. Well-paid jobs come from that professional sphere. There's been a shift in particularly in Western Australia over the last 20 years, where we're seeing that rise from traditional blue collar and then evolved into light collar, who have become very prosperous and have been able to tap into some significant wealth that's been created in this state and in this country. Now, I think if we have a look at some of the things that we are struggling with, or that we're told, I mean, housing affordability is a very hot topic. I hear it spoken about in Western Australia a lot. I still think that relative to the rest of the country, I mean, I can understand in cities like Sydney, where their median house price is circa double to what ours is here in Western Australia. We have, relatively speaking, very high earnings in Western Australia, and still, relatively speaking, much lower cost of housing. I think we all look to our kind of insular little environment and think back to the good old days and how much things have changed. But I still think on a relative scale that in Western Australia, there's still lots of opportunity here. And I think there's opportunity for people to tap into well-paid work. Housing affordability in Western Australia, I think like everything, it's a question of compromise. I understand that I've got children that are growing up, and I understand why people would want to keep their children living close by, and why someone who's grown up in a particular community would want to stay living close to where they'd grown up, and maybe those opportunities to buy into some of those areas are limited, and they now need to explore other areas. So that is a point of compromise. It's probably a point of compromise in how we view housing in Australia in general, particularly in Western Australia, where again we've been blessed with lots of land and expanse, where the Australian dream has been your own piece of land, big home. Maybe we need to rethink what housing looks like.
Can we shift gears into crypto, and how are the regs catching up to what's happening in the crypto space? And have people come to you and said, "Oh yes, I have this portfolio. Can you manage my crypto portfolio?" And how are those conversations going with you?
The simple answer is no, we haven't had too many of those conversations. As I said to you before, we're very conservative in the approach that we take. We as a business, as the ultimately responsible person within that business, sleep much easier, building our clients' wealth slowly and managing downside rather than searching for speculative wins. So, yeah, I think we've probably conveyed our value proposition well enough that we don't attract that type of clientele coming to us. We've had discussions with clients who have explored it and want to dabble in it, and some of them have. It's not an area that we have got involved with. There is increasing regulation around crypto and talk of more regulation, which I find quite ironic, given that and the price of crypto jumps whenever there's some positive news on regulation. It jumps whenever there's some positive news on the way that governments are viewing crypto. Which, like I said, I do internally smile a little bit because if you think about at its core and when crypto started to emerge, the whole point of it was that it wasn't going to be regulated and that it wasn't going to be under the control of governments, and the doomsdayers were all going to be investing in it when the apocalypse eventually came and fiat currency was going to be over. Well, we were going to be the ones holding this stuff that was off that government grid. So I do find it quite amusing that there's this increasing push and positivity around governments favourably viewing crypto. But yeah, look, it's probably not an area that I know enough about, that I've explored enough to be able to comment to your viewers in any meaningful way.
In your initial response, you talked about people who are with a lot of experience, they are close to retirement, they don't want to invest time and effort in the new qualifications or the tick box, which the recent qualifications the government wants them to have on to be called, the planners and advisors. So, and as you said, there's on the other side, there is reducing number of advisors and planners, which means access to advice is becoming limited. Because you have a fair chunk of workforce who are keen and probably able and keen both to be available. So how can that be used if not just say okay, these are people who are wanting to move out, but let them not have any more. So how can we expand because access to a good financial advice is always important, and probably supports the long-term idea of financial literacy and uplifting the financial quotient of average investor, or how can that be brought to the middle Australia?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Look, a lot of the ones who are exiting because they're looking at, what needs to be invested in getting those qualifications versus the timeline that I have. So how many of those would probably be retiring not too far beyond that anyway? So they say, I'll be retiring next year because I'm not going to meet that qualification. There's a strong chance they would have been retiring 2 or 3 years after that anyway. So they may have been lost to the workforce, and that knowledge might have been exiting the environment one way or another. So I think we've got a broader discussion here around, how do we harness people who are retiring and the knowledge that they have. But I think retirement now is a very different concept to what it might have been 20 or 30 years ago. People are living longer, so they're in retirement mode for a longer period of time. I think people are much more youthful at those retirement ages as well. I think we're a lot more in touch with fitness, health, all those things that lead to people at retirement age not nearly being as old in mind or body as what a retiring person might have been 20 or 30 years ago. So there's still a lot of energy and probably a lot to give, whether that's in financial services or anywhere else. I think with the rise of scalable businesses, there's going to be opportunity for that type of talent to be repurposed and redeployed in mentoring, teaching, guiding young professionals coming through. So they may not be licensed, so they may not be the person who can sit in front of that client and be able to give the advice and sign off on it, but they can be utilised back in those businesses. Small corner shop advice practices don't have the scale to be able to repurpose that type of experience and that type of talent. The rise of larger businesses, the rise of the consolidated practices where there is scale, where they are bringing in graduates, where they are training and putting graduates through professional years. And if they've got a pool of graduates and a regular stream of graduates coming through that they're training, then there'll be a role for those people. But that's only if we can create scale to provide that sort of structured training to new people coming through. Our biggest concern, and I see that as an employer of lots of graduates and young people coming into our business, isn't so much that we're leaking retiring talent, is that we're not getting enough new ones coming in through the system. So the requirement. So we once upon a time used to have graduates coming into our business, and I've for a long time, since I've been hiring people, taken an approach that we were only ever hiring degree qualified financial professionals who were looking for a career path. So we're always hiring people with bachelors of commerce or business, with majors in some sort of related field: banking, finance, accounting, economics. People with an interest in finance. We then started seeing universities offer the major in financial planning, and that's now became the benchmark. If you wanted to become licensed, you needed to have a major in financial planning, or go and do some sort of postgrad, so grad dip in financial services, in addition to a relevant degree, like a commerce degree of some description. What we found was we were getting grads coming through who would come through and do a financial planning unit at university as maybe one of their electives in their final year of university. So they've gone and done an accounting major or an economics major or a finance or banking or some sort of major, and then towards the end of their studies have taken financial planning as an elective unit and thought, oh well, this is fascinating. I like the sound of this. This sounds like something I'd enjoy doing. And then have gone and pursued roles in financial planning. Unfortunately, what they've then realised is that their degree isn't enough for them to continue to work, and very shortly after then commencing in that workspace, that they've got to go do some postgraduate study in order to continue down that pathway. And for a lot of them, that's been the tipping point. That's been the opt-out point. So I say, okay, well, with my degree, I can go into this space over here and have a career that doesn't require me to do any further or additional qualifications to get licensed, but I can still be in a similar. They can go work in funds management. They can go work in and still be in that finance world, but not have to be licensed. So that's where we're seeing, unfortunately, this lack of replacements coming through. So if more people were taking it on as a major to start with, rather than seeing it as something that they only discover at the end of their studies, and more universities were offering it as a major, and there was a greater awareness maybe from the high school stage, where people, when they were entering university and choosing their majors, and say, okay, well, I'm going to go do a commerce degree. If you need to choose your major, that they see it as a career path from the very beginning, or that their parents, because the parents have a lot of influence over the choices that their children make during that time. saw it as a career path that they would encourage their child to pursue. So I think a lot of education needs to be done earlier on, so that yes, we have a concern about people leaving and people retiring, and we think this is terrible. Look at how many we're going to have. I said this publication that said 1,000 are going to be retiring next year. They probably would have been retiring over the next few years one way or another. Our biggest concern is, if we've got 1,000 retiring out there, are we getting 2,000 coming in out the other end? Right? That's our problem, not that problem out the other end.
Lovely.
I think you fairly defined very well the use case that we don't have a problem of more people retiring, we have a problem of less people joining in the sector. And what do you see in terms of the younger people who are very new into the workforce and probably 5, 7, 10 years, and they are looking for investments? So how is their view on financial literacy or understanding of financial literacy, and either getting their own hands dirty with their own investment portfolios or seeking advice?
I think just in general, there's we talk about young people 5, 7, 10 years into the workforce. So we might be talking people in their mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
I don't think this is just a matter of how they approach investments. I think there's been a shift, as I was saying earlier, in how people how they receive information and what their expectations are. My observation is that there's an increasing gravitation towards instant gratification, quick wins. The Instagram world shows all these people living amazing lives, and I think a lot of young people, I think a lot of older people, are probably influenced by these beautifully presented lives that they're scrolling through and seeing on their phones every day, and aspire to something that may or may not be founded in reality, but they aspire to it and they see others enjoying it, so they're wanting to enjoy it too. They're at the early stages of their careers, so their earnings probably aren't yet at a point where they can match that. So they're wondering, well, how do we do that? Which then the next thing that comes through in their feed is one of these advertisements promising them quick wins. So my observation is that there is a lot of focus on speculation, on quick wins. There isn't patience. I think if they come and speak to somebody who takes a more conservative approach to the way that money is managed, sometimes they can probably walk away feeling a little bit underwhelmed. They can walk away feeling like, it hasn't met their requirement. I get a lot of inquiries come through into our business, internet, with people asking for passive income. So the inquiry comes through saying, can you show me, or I want to make some investments for passive income. Now, as part of our value proposition to our clients, the end game for all of our clients is that we pay off their debts, we build up capital in order to provide them passive income. That's what everybody should eventually down the line be aspiring to, is that we can secure accommodation, be debt free, and have made smart choices along the way, managed our cash flows, and engaged the right structures to be able to at some point flip from living off our own human capital to living off the proceeds of our financial capital.
Yeah.
But that passive income, that's an end game after a significant journey.
Yeah.
But we're getting people coming to us at the very early looking for passive income. And it's almost like this world has been created where there is this expectation that it's just as easy as asking for it and it'll be delivered. So that's been my observation. So I think once again, talking about education and talking about literacy, we don't do enough financial literacy in our school system. This could be another one of these areas where some of that retiring talent is redeployed. Maybe they're the ones who go into the education system and teach people the fundamentals of finance, in the way that we teach the fundamentals of all sorts of other subjects and life skills in our schools. And perhaps if that sort of education and sharing of knowledge was ingrained in children, in teenagers, into young adults, they might be less guided by these influences and probably have a different perspective on their expectations around investments.
In the recent, I think 4 or 5 years or 10 years, there's an increased nature of, or exponential increase in those financial frauds and scams through SMSs, and people, being caught into the whole, swirl of scams. What are the conditions which has been created within the financial system so that it's much easier to, execute a scam?
Well, I think this is where there is nothing that's been created in the financial system that's allowed for scams to rise, because the reason they're a scam is because they sit outside of the financial system. Right? So this is the actual point. The financial services system is incredibly regulated. All the reasons I was saying before why advice has become so expensive to deliver is because of the high degree of regulation. So I think anybody that's within the system is going to find themselves in a relatively safe environment, safe from scam environment. There's always going to be outliers. We're not now talking about scams so much. Now we're just talking about people who are acting dishonestly within a regulated system. That's always going to happen across all sorts of different professions and industries and sectors. Scams are being delivered by people who sit outside of the sector. That's why it's a scam. One of the things that the media reports differently there, though. So someone, it's really interesting. When you read about, and there's been cases in the press recently about people who have put themselves forward maybe as doctors or psychologists or so forth, and been running practices fraudulently. When the press talks about it, they'll say, well, someone impersonating a doctor or somebody impersonating committed these crimes. They don't talk. Then they'll say there was the Melissa Caddick case, where very high profile case where they said, well, financial advisor fraudulently committed fraud against her clients. Because she wasn't a financial advisor, but they don't come and say phony advisor or somebody impersonating an advisor. She wasn't an advisor. She was creating these statements. It was a scam. She was outside of the system. There's. I don't think there's anything
it's a fine
within.
line.
I don't know. I think it's actually there's a very clear black and white line. Scams are coming from unregulated sectors. So if you're working with somebody who's regulated, okay, there's always good and bad, better or worse players within a regulated system, and some people who might fly a little bit closer to the line and try to skirt the grey areas. But these scams, the stuff that's coming through from SMSs, the stuff that's coming through these other areas, cold calls, all these things that are coming through there, that's completely unregulated. That's a criminal sphere and something for the courts or the judicial system to deal with on a criminal basis rather than a regulatory basis.
We've been raised, as I've been raised, not to take credit at all, buy in cash. From that mindset, from a family point of view. But there are new products available out there, buy now, pay later, which is this afterpay and those kind of products available. How does that impact the access to financial investments post, because you're getting into a cycle of having a credit which is too much, buying for smaller things, microcredit. So how do you see that in terms of, because before you become an investor, you have to take the debt off you.
Look, yes and no. I said there's certainly a place for debt. There's certainly a place for leverage, and I would say most wealthy people, most people who have a very strong financial grounding and find themselves financially secure have probably, to more or less of a degree, utilised debt and utilised leverage
for properties and stuff
to their benefit. So I think, again, in the right circumstances, with the right timeframes, with the right equity position, with the right income position, with the right risk profile, there's certainly a place for well-structured debt, and you can use it very much to your advantage. Look, we're probably not dealing with the sorts of clients who are coming in and are burdened by this type of micro debt. There's certainly there's a role then for the financial counsellors out there. Again, these are the ones who are working with lots of the charities and so forth, who are helping people out of very tight, almost the verge of bankruptcy type situations that are based on. We're not talking about people who've gone and borrowed millions of dollars to get into investments. We're talking about people who are facing bankruptcy because they've run up credit card debts and personal loan debts and sometimes debts only in the tens of thousands of dollars that lead them to face bankruptcy. So there's obviously an impact down at that level. Is it predatory? There could be an argument that some of the most vulnerable people in our community look to that type of buy now, pay later. Credit cards and other types of credit have had hurdles in the past. I've never used Afterpay or anything like that myself, so I'm not actually sure what the process is. I understand it's a pretty simple process. So the barriers to access that type of small level consumer credit are quite low, which means that it probably does disproportionately impact some of the most vulnerable people in our community. But how does it impact long-term investing? How does it impact people's long-term financial future? Look, is someone using Afterpay to buy a $1,000 mobile phone, but not waiting to save the money, but paying it off over 4 or 5 installments or whatever it is? Is that going to preclude them from being financially secure in the future? Probably not, in isolation. But it probably comes back to the point I was making earlier around instant gratification. And it just probably drives a shift in the way that society as a general views time frames between setting a goal and achieving it, right? Where simple things like buying household appliances were once upon a time a goal that people set and worked at over a period of time and then achieved it. And maybe that grounding and that mindset and that programming was then applied to other parts of their finances. Whereas I'm not a psychologist, so I can't. Although a lot of what we do, and a lot of people think that what we do is all about dollars and cents. Goodness, we are behavioural psychologists and marriage counsellors and all sorts of different parts to our role and how we engage with clients. Because there's this, and this is where the rise of technology and advice and AI and advice. It might start to get much better in the future, but at this stage, what you get from anything digital gives you the exact outcome. You do this option is better than that option, or plug your details into this calculator, and it will tell you what you then should do. But that's making the assumption that people are rational beings. And that we make objective, or that we make our decisions based on objective data. We're not. Humans all walk in with their own sets of preferences and prejudices and all things which are based on whether it's personal experience, whether it's based on family experience, cultural influence, all these different things that impact and filter our thinking. We apply. So sometimes we can come to a client and say, well, if you do this, this is going to be the outcome. If we do that, this is going to be the outcome. And objectively speaking, we know which path should be the one that they should take. Yet they'll resist it based on their, as I say, all that previous programming. So the role of a good advisor is to, over time, be an agent of change, to, over time, influence better outcomes, and we influence outcomes, and we become agents of change through sometimes an extended period of time that's built up through knowledge, or an increase of knowledge in the clients, through their experience, through us sharing our knowledge with them, and then them applying it practically, and that experience coming through, trust being built, a demonstration of opportunity costs, that over time they've made this decision, but we can then revisit that with them in a few years' time and say, look, this is the decision, but if we'd made that decision, this is the outcome, or this other decision we could have had. And so we become, I said, these agents of change that allow our clients to become far more confident, to have a much broader understanding, to make then future decisions based on a whole other set of programming and experience and new habits that have been created, and the positive results that come from that. So this is where the role of a good advisor comes in. It's not just about percentages. It's not about having, you can have the most in-depth knowledge of every investment and every tax structure. You can know it down to a T. But if you can't convey that in a relatable way to the person sitting in front of you, if you can't help them unpack all of that programming and all of that baggage that they're bringing to the table, some of the things that are maybe blocking their process, if you can't influence that change in behaviours and habits, well, they're not going to get the result, which means that they're not going to see the value in the relationship. So this is, like I said, this is about much more than just dollars and cents.
Lovely. Thank you.
All right, Dev. My pleasure.